So in this segment, we're going to be discussing, fiscal rules. You got the former Bank of England, Andy Haldane, saying Jeremy Hunt's and Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules are going to hold back investment, and it's self-defeating on their own terms. And Labour consistently talk about their fiscal rules, and Rachel Reeves has talked about the iron discipline and all of this kind of stuff, despite the fact that other commentators keep saying, well, Labour aren't going to do these things, blah, 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 Labour are going to get growth, or they have to get growth. It was like, okay, the fiscal rules are going to be the thing that holds you back, and this according to a former Bank of England economist.
Rules themselves are good, fiscal or otherwise. These fiscal rules are not good. Rachel's version of them are better than Jeremy's version of them. But they're both
not good enough.
Well, the debt rule is the one that's binding constraint right now. And that is leading everyone to project a falling path for investment that Anushka just showed. And we all know that if you don't invest today, there's no growth tomorrow. And the way you solve a debt problem is not by cutting, it's by growing. So these rules, as currently cast, are self-defeating, Robert.
And we've known this stuff since the 1930s, really, with Keynesian economics. The Americans knew that with Henry Hoover, I think his name was, and obviously famously with FDR. You have to invest money. You have to do things like infrastructure projects. That's something Jess Phillips actually talked about. HS2 brought more investment into Birmingham, and then she talked about Rachel Reeves' boring fiscal rules, which seems very counterintuitive. That you talk about how much infrastructure projects are brought into your constituency and then say, oh, we're going to cut back on these sorts of things. It doesn't really make sense.
Well, I agree that the priority has to be growth. And like
this Labour shadow employment minister,
fiscal rules matter, not, in their own terms, but because of consistency. And I think that's what Andy is pointing to. You want
what if they're consistently poor? Or if they're, when you look at other countries that are doing way more in terms of subsidies and investment, you look at the EU, for example, and you look at America, for example, they're offering way more in subsidies and other things in order to entice investment. What are we doing to get that? Nothing.
Chancellor and a set of policies that are predictable over time, because that helps businesses invest. So actually, when Rachel set out in her May's lecture the whole strategy, of course the rules are a part of it. They're about creating a framework of stability that will bring in that investment.
She wants to bring down debt as a percentage of GDP over the short term. By the looks of it, over the term of Parliament, she's not going to do anything that's going to really increase it post, the late 2020s general election. And so that means you're talking really small infrastructure projects at that point, things that are going to generate a fairly quick return within the space of a couple of years, which big infrastructure projects don't generally do that. It's kind of thinking it's very small time. It doesn't work.
That then can help us reform the economy so that we can deal with the big failing, which, as Andy knows very well, is the lack of productivity growth in our economy. That we need growth that is sustainable.
But you can't get productivity growth without investing, and Andy has just said that your rules will not allow sufficient investment. But you haven't actually answered the question.
Sorry, the thing that people
quite explicitly not answered the question,
The thing
Alison.
that people keep forgetting is the labour market. That at the moment, businesses are crying out for staff, and as Anushka's charts showed earlier, poverty is shooting up, but unemployment is low.
This is sounding very conservative right now.
So what's going on there? Well, we've got high inactivity because people are sick and unwell. So actually, our strategy of having 2 million more appointments in the NHS will help people get into work, and for those who are not doing enough hours, do more hours, and that will help the economy.
Oh, I see. So your plan is to get people who are medically unfit back into work, which is fine, but really look into the unemployment market, which consistent conservative governments have done that, and it's not really worked. It's not solved labour crises and other things. This plan in terms of to boost productivity won't work, and 2 million appointments will help cut down the backlog for appointments, but I don't know if it'll be anywhere near enough. To be honest, these are very slow sticking plasters on shotgun wounds at this point. This is what we are approaching here. And when we look at these fiscal rules, right, these are set by the chancellors. When you look at the UK, right, 101% debt to GDP ratio, which is bad. It's not great. When you look at other countries like Italy, for example, France would be the biggest one, 111.9% debt to GDP ratio. no one's crying at them saying, oh, you can't buy out EDF and do other projects because your debt to GDP ratio is too high. Spain are getting a lot more foreign investment in because their economic viability is looking a lot better than the UK's at the moment. The only reason that we managed to grab one of the Jaguar plants is because we offered massive subsidies. Spain's energy costs are lower. We should look at these kind of fundamental things that are really hampering the UK. Why are we paying more for energy and things like that? Why are we paying more for certain things that other countries simply are not? Belgium 108, Portugal 107. Portugal's invested very heavily in green energy, and they're gonna benefit from that massively because they're gonna have much cheaper, much more stable sources of energy. These are things the UK should be doing. The Scandinavians really killing it there with very low debt to GDP ratios. But this whole idea of the UK can't afford to borrow more is simply nonsense. Other countries are borrowing significantly more to us compared to their debt to GDP ratios. These are artificial rules. These are rules being set by chancellors because they don't want to. This is based around not scaring the electorate, but short term it might help you. It might help you win over more voters. But in that next election, when you're struggling to actually show kind of results, because you refuse to borrow money to invest in infrastructure projects, invest in people's local constituencies, I don't think it's going to go down very well at all when you haven't really grown the economy because your policies are too sticking plaster. What are you going to have to show for it? And that's what he's kind of saying here, I think. These are not going to work long term. They're going to have very minimal growth, and all Labour can do is hope that the Conservative Party and the far right don't have a massive revival, because if they do, Labour will struggle in their after their first term, that election, because this is about results now. This is about you're telling people you're going to fix things, or at least people want things to be fixed. They're going to take a chance on you now because people hate the Conservative Party, and if you don't show results, it's over. You're going to struggle massively after that first term, and I genuinely am kind of nervous about it, given how kind of Reform UK are kind of polling. I know I've cited this poll a fair few times here, but they're at 16 points on date of recording. If they hit higher, if they hit into the 20% mark, it's terrifying. So this whole kind of securonomics logic is going to bore voters, it's going to bore the markets, and most importantly, it's not going to get the growth that Labour keep saying that it's going to get. The thing that would have gotten growth is that Green Prosperity Plan, which they dropped. They dropped it because they didn't know how to argue for it. Other countries have much better green policies than us. They've invested much more money in green energy, and they are reaping the rewards of it whilst we're fumbling in the wind. And the more I hear about these fiscal rules, the more I hear about people keep saying, oh, Labour are going to grow the economy and blah, 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 with no facts, no evidence, with them effectively saying...
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
This is the only thought that comes into my head.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
Because genuinely, it's baffling. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.